Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Sales Call Overhaul podcast and live show. I'm Jeremy Pope, and this is my co-founder,
Jason Canigan. Wow.
Thanks,
I remember
Jason.
my own name today.
Right. And this week, our guest is Courtney Kostelecky, who is a fantastic copywriter and webinar consultant. And boy, he's just done so many cool things coming from the sales world into the copywriting world. We're just so pleased to have him on. Thank you so much for being with us today, Courtney.
Hey, my pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We are going to be doing our sales call overhaul next week. We've got a winner for next week. And our guest next week will be Jim Padilla, who has, I hope I said his name correctly, who has a company very similar to ours here at the Closing Engine. Jim is, he runs high-ticket closing teams for bigger companies than we do. We work more in the smaller area, and he does more launches and live events kind of stuff. But we're excited to have him on, and we'll be doing a sales call overhaul, a review of your calls. So send in your calls to win our $1,100 sales call overhaul package. We want to hear it. Send it in, and we will rebuild it live on the air with our guest that week. And we will send you a reference manual for your future calls so you can boost your close rate immediately. This week, we're going to be talking about webinars and about the just the ways to put those together. Let us know who you want to hear as a guest as well and what topics you want us to cover. And we'll be happy to do that as long as it relates to high-ticket sales and specifically high-ticket phone sales. Jason?
Right on. Yep. We're here. We got Courtney. Awesome. I can personally attest to this man's energy and just passion about sharing knowledge and doing something. He's bounced around in our group more than any guest so far before being on the show. It's been amazing to watch.
It's a lot of fun.
Thanks for being there and creating engagement and getting people interested.
You got to engage, otherwise you're going to get killed with a new Facebook algorithm.
Right. We don't want that to happen. So what has Courtney done? Well, he is an author. He's got an upcoming book out called How to Be a Webinar Rock Star. Proven tips, tricks, and strategies to get more qualified leads and close more sales with webinars.
We all like that.
That kind of dovetails into what we're talking about today, doesn't it?
Yeah. Though.
However, he is already a best-selling author and consultant, specializes in inside telesales, another reason why we had him on the show, direct response copywriting, webinars for online presentations, and email marketing. He was one of the top inside sales representatives when he was working for Yahoo, generating leads for their PPC division.
Whoa,
and using his skill.
Old school.
It is. Oh, it gets better.
Check this out. He used that skill to make it past the executive secretary to sell PPC campaign to Trump Towers.
No.
So you can get past the gruff.
Yeah.
Since then, he's worked for Microsoft, and while working with Microsoft, he broke and set company records for the most qualified leads in a month, which for his area was 38. Besides his personal consulting and training, he is the marketing director for Fishnet Marketing, a company that provides marketing for Microsoft and other technology partners. So the man has a lot of experience training thousands of entrepreneurs. We have a lot to learn, business owners, through his products and one-on-one coaching, consulting, speaking, and his glorious presence, which we are now in.
Right.
You could see the soft light.
Right.
So let's begin with this. In an era of high-ticket closer salespeople, which seem to be more and more abundant every day, I mean, we get a ton of them trying to come into the group, some of them from very odd places. What relevance do high-ticket webinars have?
Well, here's the deal. And this goes back to a conversation that you started, Jeremy, is what's the difference between a VSL and a webinar? And they're kind of structured the same, but with a webinar, I mean, even if it's an evergreen webinar where you've got a lot of, auto replay stuff, you are still having that connection with the person that you don't get with a VSL.
Right.
And typically with a VSL, you're selling an info product, which is going to be anywhere from, maybe $10, probably 47 to maybe a couple $100.
Okay.
And it's basically lead magnet, go into the OTO, which is selling something, and you got a VSL to go there, or maybe it's just a standalone VSL to sell something. Now with a webinar, you can have some interaction with people. And the other thing that is nice about a webinar is, and this is where, in my opinion, a lot of people are really screwing it up with this hero's journey stuff. Yeah.
We've talked about that before.
We could talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Where you were actually, building some rapport. And with a webinar, if it's structured properly, you can do some indoctrination at the beginning. You can do some things to get more people to your webinar, because the more people on your webinar, the higher, the more people you have a chance to close on.
Right.
And then your follow-up sequence from your webinar. So there's all these different things that are coming around. And, you mentioned, the high ticket closers and stuff like that. High ticket closers are like the people, everybody
like
is, well, no. A lot of people that are calling themselves high ticket closers, they've maybe taken, some coaching from somebody.
Okay, I see what you mean.
To put that in perspective, they own ClickFunnels. They bought a copy of a book. They're now a funnel expert.
We get a fair number of people wanting to come work for us that are basically that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But just by, there's so much more to a funnel. You need to be able to do the copywriting. You need to have the automations in place. There's just so many things that a lot of people, they're just not getting that education. I'm actually, a certified funnel agent, funnel consultant, and I actually got certified. I was doing funnels before they were even cool. That was, 5-6 years ago. I was one of the first people to go through Frank Kern and Ryan Dice's funnel training. And it was, it's like, wow. It's like you got the return path and this, and it's, it's crazy. And that leads me to another thing. I think I mentioned this earlier, Jeremy, about the one guy that spent 40 hours putting his webinar together.
We talked about this a little bit in chat about how it's so easy to try and get a webinar going. And when you don't know what you're doing, it's going to be stillborn almost every time. Even if you finish it, it needs copy in it.
It really does.
Real copy from a real copywriter to convert properly.
I was doing a consultation with somebody a couple weeks ago, and he told me that he spent, we had a conversation. I just said, I'm just kind of curious, before you found me, how many hours do you think you spent watching webinars, trying to pick out what you think works, what you think doesn't work, and trying to cobbling something together? He says 40.
Easily.
I said, an entire work week. He says, well, now that you put it that way, yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, you don't know who you're modeling. I mean, you can be modeling, somebody who's, a guru. You don't know what kind of relationship that they have with their list. Are the people that are converting coming from a warm list? Is it cold traffic?
Right.
There's all these different variables that you have no clue. You don't know what their indoctrination sequence is. You don't know what happens if people say no. You don't know what happens if people don't show up. You don't know what happens if people bail halfway through the webinar. There's just so much stuff, and you're just kind of, blindly doing it. The same thing when people are trying to, cobble together their own copy.
So what's your feel, Courtney, on how, I know you kind of, you covered this a little bit in the group with the asterisks comment. What's your feel for how high a price a webinar offer can sell at, and why?
I think, in my opinion, if you are going from a webinar to a close, you're probably looking at somewhere between $997 to, if you're really good and you've got a good bond with your list, $5,000. Anything after that, you can probably still do it, but I think there needs to be another step, and that is a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
There's hope for us yet, Jeremy.
And
we're not obsolete yet. No.
And that's just from what I've seen, and
then you can go up to the 150K range on Max once you add the phone calls.
Yeah.
But I've seen people do some higher stuff, but some of it's hard to say. Okay,
and it's not to cold traffic. It's probably not to cold traffic.
Right,
that's the big thing. Because a lot of these
people ad recently about you don't need a group, you don't need content. It literally said a waste of time. Content marketing was a waste of time, and the company with that ad has an awful lot of content out there. Like, all right, fine. So yeah, it's all about that warm list, and we've neglected to build a warm list ourselves, and so we're learning to do that. So that stuff is really exciting to us. The pieces that go on behind the scenes, the emails that get people showing up for the webinars and for the phone calls and all that stuff. What kind of emails? Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll wait. I can wait till the end.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, what kind of emails do you like to see in a webinar funnel?
It all depends on what your model is.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to, if you're sending cold traffic to an opt-in page, and then after that, if you're doing like an OTO, what's worked actually okay for some people is if you have an email after that saying, oh, by the way, I don't know what happened. You clicked on the OTO, you missed out. You can still get it. This is your last chance. You can do that if you want. But leading up to the webinar, and this is kind of where it gets interesting, because you've got this whole phenomenon of evergreen webinars or webinars on demand, where you really can't indoctrinate anybody with that.
Right.
Because it's like you click on, oh, geez, there's a spot coming in 5 minutes. You're just in time. There's a new webinar coming up in 5 minutes. I'm getting out of bed to do a webinar for you in 5 minutes. It's like lucky day. So you really can't. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those, but you really can't.
It compresses the time frame so hardcore.
It does. It does. And so now what you have to do is you have to have an amazing follow-up system, or you have to have a really, really good webinar, or a combination of the two, to get them to, click the buy button or schedule a call with you. Before the webinar, I like to have a couple of emails. The technical term is like indoctrination sequence. And I like to have some of those. Now, one of the things that a lot of people aren't doing is, and
okay.
You always hear, and I talk about this a little bit in the optimization package I gave to you guys. People always say, all right, you need to turn off your Facebook, turn off your email, stuff like that. That's all fun. Get out of pen and paper, take notes. Not many people actually do that.
Right.
Because they're on Facebook, they're on their mobile, they're doing all this stuff, they've got all these notifications coming in, whatever. So one of the things that I like to do is kind of after they get the welcome email, say, hey, you're registered. What I like to do is send them kind of a brief outline of what the webinar is going to be about. It's kind of like those bullet points again.
Sure.
And then what I do is I either do it there, or after they're registered, I take them to a download page where they can download their workbook to use on the webinar.
I like that.
Because, and the workbook doesn't have to be anything fancy. I mean, the workbook can be, fill in the blank.
Right.
And it can be a specific phrase that you want to drill in, into your prospect's mind. And
of course, I can immediately see that fitting in with our webinar.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking of doing it with a webinar bot, a messenger bot that runs concurrently with the webinar, so that at certain times it sends you a message while you're watching. But this
that might be distracting. I don't know.
I was just thinking,
probably worth testing.
It is distracting. You know, it is distracting. I mean, and that's another thing. A lot of people are doing their webinars and their stuff inside of Facebook as a Facebook Live, and they're calling it a webinar. Which I guess technically it is, because it's, you know, it's an R on the web, so technically it is. but what's happening, and this happened yesterday, Jeremy. When I was doing, you know, your optimization stuff, I was watching your webinar, and all of a sudden you pop up Messenger. It's like okay, so I stop it, and then I
Yeah, I actually messaged you. It wasn't part of the webinar. It was me prepping for today.
Yeah.
I actually messaged you, right?
Yeah, and so it's like, so I mean, I've got my legal pad. I'm taking notes. It's like, bing. It's like, which is fine.
Oh, it's that guy. Yeah.
Which is fine, but imagine with all the distractions going on, and you're trying to capture somebody's attention for 45 minutes, hour and a half, to get them to understand why your training can be life-changing for them if they take advantage of it. And you've got all this stuff going on. So by doing that workbook, and when they print it out, I mean, you can have your website on there. You can have some bonus goodies on there. It's like, hey, you know, download this and get them into this other thing or whatever it might be.
So it's not quite as good as shipping them an isolation chamber, but that's the effect we're aiming for.
We could 3D print that, I think, nowadays.
Right.
You probably could. You know, so, I mean that's just one thing to really get them to pay attention.
Okay. Stephen Monaco is watching. He's the $50 million man, I like to call him. He ran a $50 million company called DataStorm. And he's a CMO. He's very good at what he does. But he's asking, what are the issues with on-demand webinars that make them problematic? We've talked about the missing indoctrination sequence.
The time compression.
Right. And the fact that the person has to be ready to commit to attention basically right now. What else? Are there any other issues?
I mean, those are really some of the big ones. You know, then you have the tech. I mean, the tech, there's always, anytime you're dealing with stuff, there's always a chance for tech to go wrong.
Right.
But one of the things that, if you're doing an on-demand webinar, is even if your chat is automated or simulated or whatever it might be, if you can actually have, get back to some people and answer their questions, might not be real time,
right,
but you can get their questions answered. The other thing with that is, if you're doing something like that, what I would do is, and this really kind of breaks the flow of a traditional webinar, because you don't want to really interrupt them. But if it's an automated webinar, a lot of people, if they're savvy, they can tell, especially if it has like the YouTube logo on the bottom, they know that they can, click and stuff like that to pause it.
Sure.
If you have, some way to get them to stick around to the end, to capture their, more of their information, and to really drive them to whatever that offer is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So now, in the world of tech, technology companies are the worst with webinars.
Okay.
Most of them are show and tell. It's like, oh no,
sure.
It's no, and that's where you need to, have some pattern interrupts. And I was on a webinar. It was for a Microsoft company. The webinar was about an hour. They had 5 slides. The guy was talking the whole time. And it was, when he did break it up, it was to go into the dashboard of the software and click around. It's like, No.
And they've been doing that for more than 10 years. I mean, I've been talking about that for a long time. Software as a service vendors have learned nothing. Since I came to the United States in 2009, they were doing that back then, and they have learned nothing in the intervening decade.
Most people don't realize Jason is from Bangladesh originally.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Can't you tell?
So we see different things in the internet marketing and the online coaching space with the mistakes people make with their webinars here, like high ticket consulting and things like that. It's a very different series of mistakes, right?
Right. So are you looking for the one weird trick to increase your conversions?
Oh, but I think everybody's always looking for that. Sure.
That one weird trick.
Right. But one of the things that we've talked about a little bit is the 22-minute long hero's journey, and how you need to build rapport. But if you're doing that wrong, then you're not actually building rapport. You're just pissing people off and making them feel like they're being set up for a sales pitch, which they are if you're doing that. So how do you find people doing a good job with the introducing themselves, and not just how long do you spend on it, but what kind of things do you like to see people cover when they're introducing themselves?
So,
like the credibility kind of stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that most people don't realize is you actually have more street cred than you probably realize.
That's interesting. I've never thought about that before. Okay.
So so I was talking, to bring it back to the optimization package that I sent to you guys. You guys talk about, in your webinar, how you've, analyzed over 40,000 different calls. To put that in perspective, assuming that each call is 30 minutes long, that's 1.2 million minutes of calls that you've sat through and analyzed.
I should clarify. We've presented to that many different people.
Okay.
That's the kind of thing. So we're talking about calls that we've done.
Okay.
Sales presentations that we've made as well. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, that's fine.
It's an awful lot of practice.
But it is an awful lot of practice. And people say that, to be an expert, 10,000 times. You guys are like expert level times 4, to put it in video game perspective.
I liked the way you put that together. Yeah, I saw that and laughed. Yep.
It's just one of those things. And what I like to do is you have to have an introduction. If you just go, it's just common sense. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, when I'm scripting for myself or for clients, I like to have 3 to 5 points. I like to have 3 business-related points and then 2 random personal-related points. So business might be your business accomplishments, what you've done, who you've worked for, if you have a fancy degree from someplace, if that makes a difference in your marketplace, that's always good. And then you want to connect with people on a personal level. Maybe you like to fish. On the weekends he likes to go fishing. Or he's married and he likes to. He's married, 3 kids and his dog. Bob. Stuff like that. Right. So what I like to do is have something personal, and then 2 or 3 things business, and then finish up with some random trivia. Okay. So the reason why I like to do it that way is kind of a pattern interrupt, because people have been on webinars so freaking long and so many times that they know that, okay, this is the boring part where he's going to go on and on and on and on about.
Okay, so you mean a specific sequence there that, okay, I was not paying attention to the order you say. Would you say the order again there?
Yeah. Something personal. Then you have 3 or touch on a few business related things. If you have any qualifications, whatever it might be. And then I like to have another personal thing, and then I like to finish it up with some random trivia.
Okay, gotcha.
So what's happening is everybody's been on these webinars for so long. It's all about, it's me, 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 me. Mm-hmm. And there's like, okay, this is, the intro. I mean, how many people, and, if you guys are on Facebook, I'm curious, type this in the, in the chat somewhere, or whatever we got going on here. How many people have had the introduction about the guest go on for more than 10 or 15 minutes?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. There's an awful lot of that, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
And it's an attempt to establish authority, but where does it take you really? Into boredom land.
It really does. And what it comes down to is what's in it for me. It's like, okay, this guy has done all these wonderful things, but what's in it for me? Can we get on with this? Mm-hmm. I signed up for an hour webinar, and we're 45 minutes into it, and we haven't even got to the pitch yet. So I know it's going to go for an hour and a half. They're going to call it, bonus content. Exactly. It's not bonus content. You need 30 minutes for your pitch.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Because one of the things that I see is people not selling hard enough. That's
interesting.
You have to sell hard without being obnoxious. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I like to do too is to keep people on the webinar, and this kind of goes with the auto, with what was the guy's? Was it Sam that had the question about who do you call the $50 million man?
Stephen Monaco.
Oh, Stephen. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm really bad with faces. Because I can't even see him. I can't even see him. There we go. I'm worse with names, but if you can give people an ethical bribe, something that's going to be of value to them for sticking around to the end, you can increase your attendance. But now at the same time, you're walking a fine line, because one of the sequences that I purposely script in my webinars is who the webinar is not for, who shouldn't attend this thing. Mm-hmm. And I actually, one of my favorite things I like to do is I have an exit sign, and I, spent 20 minutes Googling YouTube videos on how to learn PowerPoint animations to make the exit sign, move up and out of the screen. It's like, you know what? If you follow this criteria, you should probably get off now, because it's not going to do you any good, because you are not at the level that you need to be. At the same time, you're still welcome to stick around. It's a suggestion, but I'm giving you. I believe in the golden rule, and I put that in almost all my webinars, where treat others like you want to be treated. If it is a training, one of the things that I really hate is saying, hey, we got this little pitch webinar, and at the end, there's a pitch. It's like, okay, Or recently, I invested in something, and there was a webinar on how to use this thing that I purchased. The webinar had nothing to do with the thing that I purchased. It was a pitch for a $2,000 super funnel. It's like, oh God, Right. And there was nothing of value, and that's something that I'm hoping to accomplish, and I'm seeing better responses with my webinars as far as show ups once people actually understand that you're going to give, and that's has to do with the hero's journey, where you got all these different parables and stories about everything. You got to teach people something.
Yeah.
You don't have to, and there's a very specific way to do it, and we don't really have a lot of time to go into it, but you still have to give them some specific knowledge that says, hey, even if I don't have the money to invest right now, I learned something and I appreciate it. And so what I like to do, I like to try and have my webinars transformational. Yeah. So and I kind of do a timeline. You've got where you're at now, where you want to be.
Sure.
And then I pick, 2 or 3, usually 3. I rarely go more than 5 specific things that I'm going to actually teach them. Might be principles. I might actually go in and teach them some actual stuff. because it's taking them from here to here to here to get to where they want to be.
Right.
Now, obviously, when they invest in me personally for my coaching, my consulting, my done-for-you services, whatever it might be, there's all this other stuff in between that gets filled in.
Right.
But we don't have time on a 45-minute, 60-minute webinar to go through all those things.
You're hitting on something there from several different angles that I'm hearing a lot of passion about, and some people would call it authenticity, but
I'm tired of attending sucky webinars.
Yeah, it's almost that's almost fancying it up too much. It's just like deliver what you say you're going to deliver. Yeah. When I hear people do the stuff you mentioned about the exit sign, who this is not for, I see that done dishonestly a lot of times. Like they're unwilling to actually exclude people. And so they'll say, look, this is not for you if you're a jerk who doesn't like money. Okay, that's not an honest disqualification, right? But it's so common. If you have an attitude problem, this isn't for you. And we're talking about the real, like, who this is not for. Right. I mean, and everybody in their businesses, they've got this kind of thing. They know it. They know who's going to be kind of a nightmare client from a business perspective, not just a personality fit perspective, but they're unwilling to do it a lot of the times.
But here's the thing. A lot of them don't realize it, because when I'm doing consultations and helping people figure out, who's this for? It's like, oh, it's for everybody.
Oh yeah. They don't know they know this, but you can get to it. As a copywriter, as a strategist, you can get to this information with them pretty quickly. I mean, 2 or 3 repetitions of that question and correcting them, they know. They know.
Yeah, I know they know. But but in order for me to do a good job, and for them to, if they're going to go it on their own, they need to actually dig in and know it.
Yeah.
It's not because it's like, oh, my products are for everyone. It's like, but they're not.
Right. Be willing to actually disqualify people there.
What we're digging into is how important having the right people on the webinar really is. And Courtney's talked around it a lot. You don't want everybody on. You don't want every single person that you can get on to be there.
No, especially if you're paying for ads.
Yeah.
I really want to stress that to our viewers, because I've been in this field 6-7 years, and a lot of newbie marketers want to throw something at the wall and hope that it sticks and get everybody in there. And it ruins your EPCs, it ruins your numbers. So, and it makes just the whole thing more difficult.
Yeah.
Obviously, pre-qualification is important to you. That indoctrination phase hits on that. What else in the pre-qualification process should people be concentrating on?
You want to focus on the benefits. And what I like to do is I have, when I have some info products or whatever it might be, you at the end, you've got the breakdown of what your package includes. I have the features, then I have the benefits. And then another thing that I like to put in is a testimonial speaking to that particular benefit, if it's possible. Another thing that we can touch on, we can go and rewinding a little bit, those 4 or 5 things when you're talking about who you are and why you should listen to me. If you have a testimonial that's awesome that you can kind of toss in the why you should listen to me thing, that might, you can't be like, Courtney's great, he's the best at what he does. That's kind of BS. But if you've got a testimonial specific to what you're going to be talking about, that's going to help too.
Yeah. Okay. So addressing the specific concern, like the most common objection someone would have about this specific item that you're getting to right now.
Yeah.
That makes sense. There's the teaching thing gets back. I'm going back a little bit to close.
And the teaching thing can bite you in the butt. It can bite you in the butt.
Balance there.
It is.
Providing the value you say you're going to provide is vital. Otherwise, you just burn your audience. But then if you start teaching and you get into technical stuff, you're going to lose them from a sales perspective as well.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
How do you find that balance?
Another thing is not really getting into the technical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have an audience that's relatively savvy, where they can kind of put all the pieces together, that's fine for them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did a webinar a couple of years ago with a guy, and we had pretty decent turnout and 0 sales.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back, it's like, okay, this is what happened is we just taught too much.
It was too much of a complete picture that you were giving. Like,
Yep.
oh, I can put all these pieces together, not just a couple of good tidbits they can take away and implement tidbits. It was the whole thing.
Yep. And the other reason why, the other reason why that didn't work out so good is because I didn't have complete control over everything. He was hosting it, and I was like, it was like a joint venture type of a deal.
Yeah.
And so we didn't have all our stuff connected, and it's like, let's do a replay. I don't want to send out an email. We didn't get any sales because a lot of times.
Did we lose our feed?
Okay.
Did you?
Let's hang on for technical difficulties for a moment, Courtney.
Okay.
That thought, though. Let's see. I'm looking at the Facebook live thing. Sure.
Am I on the air? I think so.
I'm still showing live.
Steven says we're off.
Okay.
At 2:30.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then we'll come back to that topic. What were we talking about right there, Courtney? Okay, great. All right, we're live again. Go ahead, Courtney, or we can go into some other questions if we don't remember. But so it was a joint venture kind of thing, and you weren't in control of the whole setup.
Yeah. And it was like, well, we'll try it. I have all this time I've invested in it, and I'm going to move on to something else.
Right.
Super nice guy. We may actually revisit it later on. But he's one of these guys that he's from the internet marketing world where emails going out 2-3 times a day, new product that he's promoting, stuff like that. Basically, he's a super affiliate. Basically, what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, I'm going to move on to we tried this, and I have I invested some time in this. Let's move on to something else. So it's
right.
And so it's a learning experience.
So you need to be in control of the funnel. You need to have a clear idea of what's going on at every step of the funnel.
Yep.
And you need to qualify your peeps properly. And a lot of people talk about trying to target their Facebook ads so that they're qualifying using Facebook. But a lot of that qualification happens in the copy itself, doesn't it? People self-qualify out because the benefit doesn't speak to them. Or
It does. It does. So something else that you can do to increase more qualified leads is there's a specific way that I like to use. It's a formula. I'll give you guys a formula right here.
Okay.
It's how to X without Y.
Right.
Simple copywriting formula. But if you use that for naming the presentation of your webinar, works really great. Okay. And then if you have a tagline, that works good too. So if you have a webinar, the title of your webinar is what they need to know or what you want to sell them, but not what they think they want. Okay. So let me give an example. Let's say, for example, I know it's kind of might be confusing. So let me give you an example. Okay. Let's say, for example, that I sell credit repair services. Okay.
Okay.
So if I have a Facebook ad that says free webinar shows you how to repair your credit. Okay. That's going to be okay. I know I'm going to have some people definitely clicking on that. But at the same time, that chance of that being shared with friends and stuff like that, it's just like, it's kind of like, yeah, it's
Right.
like, you know. So what you would do is you would have a webinar, how to buy your first dream home, no matter what your credit is.
Okay.
And so you have them. So now you have people that might have good credit.
Mm-hmm.
They probably have not so good credit because they're on there.
Mm-hmm.
And you give them some specific things. So you go through you need to get pre-qualified, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing that you guys are going to need, and the 5 things that you need to buy your dream home, no matter what your credit is you got to have credit.
Yeah.
And then you go into, kind of your thing.
Yeah. And that takes care of that right there.
Yeah.
So for instance, our sales call overhaul webinar that you so graciously looked at with us for us, we might, if we're retitling that, we might retitle it something like how to boost your close rate 10% without going through a month of expensive sales therapy or something along those lines.
Buying sales training.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I like that. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Courtney, have you been in the position where somebody has approached you for a webinar, but they're nowhere near the reality of being ready for it?
Yeah.
Okay. What was wrong? What was missing in that situation?
Well, what was missing is they didn't have the budget to work with me.
Well,
for one thing, but all kidding aside, guys. Besides that, they didn't know what their offering was going to be. Mm-hmm. It was a brand new digital marketing agency. They didn't have any clients yet. They're just opened up. Mm-hmm. And it's like, what are you guys going to offer? Oh, we're a digital marketing agency. It's like, okay, I know about digital marketing because this is kind of what I do. So you guys going to do SEO? Yep, we do SEO. Do you do PPC? Yep, we do PPC. Do you do Facebook ads? Yep, we do social media. What else do you do? We do what? There you go.
Yep.
And I said, so what are you going to sell? It's like, oh, we sell it all.
Yeah.
I said, you can't.
Right.
And I said, well, here's how you do it. You pick one offering, you go in with that, you make a webinar specific around that, and then you tie your offering into that to a consultation or whatever it might be, where you can really dig into these different things.
So if they have gotten to the point where they have an offer, because most of the folks
most of them do.
Yeah, most of them we're talking to in our audience, they're at that point. Then what do they need to be able to turn that into a webinar? Like, where do they need to be able to say, okay, I'm going to have a good webinar here? Like to be able to work with you, for instance.
Well, yeah. I mean, it helps it really helps if they know who their ideal customer is, who they're targeting, because I need to script the webinar to whatever it is that they're doing. And usually what I do is I script the majority of it, and then the teaching part, I say, okay, what do you want to teach? You got to teach something. And I get the stuff from them, and I say, okay, I need you to spend 20 minutes on this, and kind of give me what you're teaching, what it is, and then I will design the slides around that. So it'll be scripted. Then when it comes to your point, you can kind of jazz and do whatever you want, and then we'll pick it up.
That makes sense, because we're not talking about a webinar that will make you $10,000 a year. We're talking about when somebody gets you, they're getting $1 million webinar here. I mean, they're getting the big guns is when they call you in.
I'd like to think so, but at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of people that they're just struggling with webinars, and maybe they don't have the $5,000 for me to do everything and more with their sales funnel, but they just want some good feedback and some other things. And so that's why I've gone and I've actually created a course. I wasn't even going to mention that, but I've actually
we want you to mention it. Absolutely.
Okay. I created a course that teaches people how to do the webinar. There's 4 modules. I'm not going to, like I said, this isn't really going to be sales.
We'll put some links in the later once it's time.
We want to keep this training, but the first module is all about planning your webinar. Yeah. And it comes with a 14-point checklist that I go through. I call it my roadie, my webinar roadie game plan
for the stagehand, right?
Yeah. And then as they progress, they get, we talked about gamification. As they progress, they get these different badges. They're roadie, then they're sound tech. Then they're the opening act, and then they're the stadium headliner.
Right.
As they progress through the different things. But one of the things that people are doing kind of backwards and it has to do with this hero's journey is they start off with the PowerPoints or the slides, and then they kind of fill things in the back. And
that's the way we always did it. I worked at a company that consulted on webinars a while back, and that was kind of how we did it. We would start with the slide deck. Okay, I'm about to learn something big here.
I do it completely opposite.
Uh-huh.
And this comes from when I was doing teleseminars. Anybody know what teleseminars?
Right.
You didn't have that.
Right.
And so and basically a webinar, a webinar, there's some points to jazz and have some audience interaction and things like that, but you still need to follow some really important points. And so one of the things that I do is I script out the entire webinar, everything, every single word. And then I go and I put the PowerPoints and the slides based on I call them idea blocks. So based on that, and then you fill it in whatever you want. And then what happens is, so you're doing the thing, and when it comes time for a very critical thing, just have the person read that one sentence, 1 or 2 sentences. They can read their script. They can look down and read their script, because it is that important. Just like copy. I mean, if you have a headline and you screw up the headline, you're dead in the water. Same thing if it's.
I see what you mean.
If when it comes time from the transition, from where you're transitioning to learning, from learning to you're going to close now. Right. Have a specific phrase, specific sentence that lets people know that, okay, this is what's going to happen next. And so you have a seamless transition instead of just kind of bumbling through. Because a lot of people, if they don't have a script, and a lot of the things that I've seen when I've been doing some critiques and optimizations or whatever it is, and on other people's webinars, I can tell that they get nervous when it comes time for the close.
Right. We see that in sales calls too.
Yeah. And that's what I like to do is script it, have the very important parts scripted, and then for the teaching you can kind of free flow whatever you want to do, but you got to teach something. And I tell people right up front that this is not going to be your typical webinar. Yes, there's going to be an offer at the end, but you're actually going to learn something. It's not going to be a thinly disguised, webinar.
And you have to get more and more creative with the way you express that to people, because so many people have that sentiment somewhere in there, and then they don't deliver on it.
Oh, I know. And well,
that's one reason I like your worksheet.
It's it comes down to the fool me once, fool me twice, shame on me.
Right.
Our friend Tina Sibley will be very happy to hear all of this.
It's
what she does.
I mean, it's just not cool.
Right.
So Nolan Stubroth in our group is asking, so is improv a no-no then?
No, not at all. Not at all. Improv is important and it has its place, because improv will let you inject your humor, your personality into the presentation. When I script a webinar for somebody, I mean, it's sometimes it's like getting the voice when you're doing a sales letter. You want to get that right voice to the person. So if you know the avatar, that helps a lot too. And so what I do is I try to come up with some different things, and that's where they can kind of, jam with what they're teaching, have their own personality interjected. If they have a funny story about something, tell it. But when it comes time to the transition or some specific things for the close or the introduction, you want to have those tightly scripted.
Yeah.
I mean,
you make improv, but only in your box.
Right.
It's it's like it's almost like a movie. I mean, the movies they've got their scripts that they know is going to work, and then every now and then the actor will go off script and it's like, oh, that works really good. They'll keep it in there. But for the most part, it's all layered.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this to annoy John Paramore, but the Star Trek scripts were like that too. They'd have insert tech here. It didn't change the plot any. Yeah. You still had the plot points, but insert tech here. Yeah. I want to cover 2 questions before we run out of time here, Courtney. One is a great question from Tim McDonald, who's a former community manager for the Huffington Post. Pretty good job. Hey, Tim. How do you start from zero and drive sales, particularly without testimonials? If you've got that lack of confidence, maybe feeling some anxiety, because it's going to transfer right into what you do. What can you do?
That's a really great question, and it all depends on what your end goal is. Now, you can actually use webinars as training platforms to build your list. And in that case, they are 100% no pitch. It's, we're going to get this, you're going to get this, you're going to get this, help you build your community. But at some point, what you need to do, you need to let people know that there's going to be an investment coming along the line. Because one of the things that I see so many people do is with their email newsletter. They do all this content stuff. They put out these great blog posts. They do all this stuff. And then all of a sudden they decide that I need to monetize my email newsletter, my email list. Then they put out an offer and they get like unsubscribe, 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 because you've trained everybody.
Yeah. It's going to be all free stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a very fine line. So what you need to do is you need to figure out what your offering is. If you're going for consulting, which is going to be, average, group coaching these days is right around, 3,500 to up to 10,000 that's what I'm seeing, kind of that price range there. You need to have a budget for one thing for advertising. You need to understand what the lifetime value of your client is, but you also need to know what the instant value of that client is too.
Yeah.
So if you've got a coaching program that's $3,000, or let's say you just have an info product that's $1,000. Well, you can spend $1,000 on advertising and break even. Now, there's some things you can do beforehand. You can do like tripwires and liquidating offers and things like that to kind of recoup some of your stuff. But you really need to have a budget, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but you got to have something. And the other thing is you need to be consistent. So I did a webinar a long time ago, and I closed 100% of the people on that webinar for a $500 sale. 100% closing rate, guys. You want to know my secret?
There's one person on it?
There was one person on the call.
Yeah.
There was one person. Okay?
I was feeling cringy already. Yep.
But here's the thing. Okay, and I wasn't trying to hype it up with all this marketing. I was like, right. Discover the one secret to but here's the thing. How many people? I mean, if you have a webinar, and especially if you're just starting out, you're not going to have a big list.
Right.
Okay. And so if you get all these webinars like, hey, we got all these people on here, it's like, oh my God, we got 10,000 people on the webinar. It's like, no, you don't.
I can't relate to that. Yeah.
I don't think I don't know of any tech that will let you have 10,000 people on a live webinar without barfing.
Yeah.
So you need to be, real that way for one thing. But as you are starting to do your webinars, you're not going to have a bazillion people on there. You might have 20, 30 people register, and only 5 people show up, or 3
Right.
people show up. I mean, starting off, I mean, I've had people where I had 80 people register, and I had like 3 people show up. Now, if you're starting off, it's like a lot of people I want to say, I'm just going to cancel. It's not worth my time. Don't do it. Because, first of all, you're going to get some specific feedback. And I actually like to send people on certain occasions to a customer webinar satisfaction survey as to what they liked about the webinar. Did they invest in the web? Did they invest in the offer? Do you understand the offer that was presented? You can get some valuable stuff. If somebody says it was too long, it's like it was scripted that way. I know it was done that way on purpose. I'm just going to ignore that. But all the other stuff is valuable intel.
You're not talking about a sales email follow-up. You're talking about an actual survey email, an honest survey where you're actually trying to get data, not a push survey where you're trying to sell more in that same email.
At the end of the survey, if you got the tech, they can schedule a call and you can definitely sell them stuff.
Okay.
But
so you're using it for dual purpose.
Feedback, though, like I didn't understand from 2/3 in on.
It was too technical, and sometimes it's like I didn't understand what the offer was. And sometimes what you're going to get is, depending on the price point of your offering, is you might have caught people between payday.
Sure.
And it might be, it's like, hey, I really liked it, but it'd be nice if you'd have like a 2 or 3 pay option.
Yeah.
Then you can, work with those people on an individual basis, save the sale, and get some awesome feedback and make a customer for life.
Yeah. Well, I have a billion more questions.
We got a whole other areas we can go into with Courtney, or like telesales.
We have a question about, Stephen asks, can we answer Nolan's question about open loops? Stephen, I'm sorry, we don't have time right now. Maybe we'll get to it later.
If you come back to
the next But seriously, Courtney's been active in the group, so if you want to see the answers here, we might even well, I'm not going to make any promises there, but join the group and pay attention to this thread, search for this podcast episode, and see what we're talking about in that thread, because we are going to try and answer a couple more questions in the text there. So thank you so much, Courtney.
Yeah, it has been amazing to have you here as a guest.
I want 3 more hours.
Where should people go to get in touch with you or get more info? Where do you want them to go?
Well, here's the thing. I wanted to give you guys a lot of value, and so I didn't.
We appreciate that.
And I, so I wasn't, gonna put you guys through like an opt-in email funnel and get all this stuff, whatever.
Where can they go to get it to once it's ready?
Sure.
Whatever it needs to be. Yeah.
What they can do is they can just friend me on Facebook. They can find me. They can send me an instant message, DM, whatever. And what I'll do is I will send them my 14-point webinar roadie checklist.
Nice.
And that way there's no opt-in. They don't have to do an opt-in or anything like that. I'll just send it to them. And then in there'll be something if they want to opt in and get more stuff from me.
Cool.
Learn about my offers.
That sounds fantastic.
Schedule time with me. Want me to take a look at their webinar, help them plan a webinar. Because I'm really good. We were talking about this earlier, where everything is coming together for me, because there's certain things that I'm good at, but I don't like to do. And there's certain things that I really enjoy doing. I love copywriting. I love email writing, all this other stuff that's coming together. And I put out a bunch of info products. And so I'm really good at info products and helping people create their product and putting into an e-learning platform with some gamification to get some really great interaction, stuff like that. And so I like to kind of help with everything. So if you guys have any questions, you know where to find me.
You're great about giving that away. Thank you.
Much appreciated. All right, our guest this week has been Courtney Kostelecky. You can find him on Facebook. You just said so. Our guest next week is Jim Padilla, who runs the company that our company, the Closing Engine, is like the mini-me version of. We're going to have a great opportunity there to learn about running high-ticket sales teams and massive volume. And one of the key things that he said to us when Jeremy first talked to him was that he is similar to us, except that he's made a billion more mistakes because he's been around a lot longer, and I sure know what that feels like. So I'm looking forward to talking to him. Courtney, I really do want you back, and we'll book something for you to come back, because there's so much for us to dig into here. If you are watching and you record your sales calls, if you run a consultancy or have a business where you're doing closing calls and you record them, consider going to our Facebook page, not the group, the page. But I'm sure if you message us, we'll answer you the same. But if you go to facebook.com/salescalloverhaul, message the page, you'll find out how to upload or submit your call as a submission to win our $1,100 Sales Call Overhaul program.
Nice.
And we will be dissecting nicely, pleasantly, Mr. First Call next week as part of our meeting with Jim. That's it for us this week. That's Jeremy Pope. I'm Jason Cannigan. Our producer is Emson. Much appreciated behind the scenes. We get to see him, you don't. And we're out. Thank you.
Do we have an update on the poll if I'm wearing pants or not?
I don't think we ever did. I voted.
Wait.
No one answered. Okay, well, give us the answer, Courtney.
We were captivated by what was going on here.
No pants! Shorts only. All right.
At least he's comfortable.
All right.
I don't have windows. My apartment got trashed during the hurricane in Puerto Rico. So I don't have any windows. I got a couple ceiling fans, and if I open the door, it gets noisy with everybody doing construction, and so it's just.
And on that note, let's get out of here.
This is business casual.
All right.
Yep.